The howling wind carried the icy sleet across the desolate Wyoming plains, stinging Isabelle Parkman's face as she pressed her newborn daughter tighter against her chest, desperately trying to shield the infant from the brutal December cold of 1879. The small wooden cabin, once her sanctuary, was now nothing but smoldering ruins behind her as she stumbled through the deepening snow, her strength fading with each labored step. Isaac Fletcher spotted the smoke from miles away, turning his horse Thunderbolt toward the dark plume rising against the gray winter sky. At 28, Isaac had seen his fair share of tragedy on the frontier, but nothing prepared him for the sight that greeted him as he crested the ridge overlooking the south pasture of the Rocking Pea Ranch. A woman, barely upright, clutching a small bundle, trudging through the sleet-covered landscape. "Whoa, boy," he whispered to Thunderbolt, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Without hesitation, he spurred his horse forward, closing the distance between them just as the woman's knees buckled beneath her. Isabelle heard the approaching hoofbeats but lacked the strength to look up. When strong arms caught her before she hit the frozen ground, she managed only a whispered plea. "Save my baby." Isaac cradled the woman and child in his arms, noting the bluish tint to the mother's lips. The infant, miraculously, still had color in its tiny face, protected by its mother's body heat and the layers of blankets wrapped tightly around it. "I've got you both," he said firmly, lifting Isabelle onto his horse with strength born of urgency. "My cabin's not far. You'll be warm soon." Isabelle drifted in and out of consciousness during the ride, vaguely aware of the stranger's strong arms holding her securely against his chest, of his deep voice murmuring reassurances, and of her baby girl still breathing against her. Isaac's one-room cabin came into view, just as the sleet intensified. He dismounted swiftly, carrying Isabelle and the baby inside. The warmth from the still-burning morning fire enveloped them as he gently placed Isabelle on his bed. "Madam, can you hear me?" Isaac unwrapped the infant carefully, relieved to find the child unharmed, if cold and hungry. The baby's cries filled the cabin, a good sign. "Your little one seems okay." Isabelle's eyes fluttered open. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking from cold and exhaustion. "Grace." "Her name is Grace." "Beautiful name." Isaac stoked the fire higher, adding more logs. "I'm Isaac Fletcher. Most folks around here call me Ike." "Isabelle Parkman," she managed, trembling violently as her body began to warm. "My husband, Robert, he's—" Tears froze on her cheeks. "Save your strength," Isaac interrupted gently, wrapping his thickest quilt around her shoulders. "Grace needs you strong." The next few hours passed in a blur of warming blankets, hot broth, and tending to little Grace. Isaac proved surprisingly adept at helping with the baby, heating water to clean her properly and improvising a swaddling cloth from one of his softest flannel shirts. Night fell, bringing temperatures that plummeted well below freezing. The sleet transformed into heavy snow, effectively trapping them in the cabin. Isaac maintained the fire, keeping it roaring as Isabelle slowly regained her strength. The south pasture froze over completely, Isaac explained, as he prepared a simple supper of beans and salt pork. "Never seen sleet come down that hard in December. You're lucky I saw the smoke." Isabelle sat up in bed, cradling Grace, who now slept peacefully after nursing. "Not luck," she said softly. "Providence." "Maybe so," Isaac agreed, setting a plate beside her. "Can you tell me what happened? When I'm not playing rescuer, I'm the deputy in these parts." Isabelle's eyes darkened with remembered horror. "Outlaws, 3 of them. They came for our horses, but Robert, he tried to stop them." Her voice broke. "They shot him, set fire to our cabin. I grabbed Grace and ran. I didn't know where to go, just away from them." Isaac's jaw tightened. "The Blackwell gang, they've been terrorizing ranches from here to Colorado." He paused. "I'm sorry about your husband, Mrs. Parkman." "Please," she whispered, "call me Isabelle." "Isabelle," he repeated, her name somehow feeling right on his tongue. "You and Grace are safe now. I give you my word." That first night, Isaac slept on the floor near the fire, his 6-shooter within easy reach. Despite his exhaustion, he found himself waking at every small sound, the baby's soft cries, Isabelle's restless movements, the wind's mournful howl around the cabin corners. Something protective stirred within him, something he hadn't felt in years. Morning brought a world transformed by snow and ice. The sleet had frozen the south pasture solid, creating a gleaming expanse that stretched toward the distant mountains. Isaac stood at the window, coffee in hand, surveying the winter landscape. "It's beautiful," Isabelle said from behind him, startling him from his thoughts. She stood unsteadily, Grace in her arms. "You should be resting," he admonished gently. "I've imposed enough." Her chin lifted with determination. "Once the weather clears, we'll make our way to Cheyenne. My sister lives there." Isaac frowned. "That's 60 miles in winter conditions with a newborn. You can't possibly—" "I have no choice," she interrupted. "I have nothing left here." Isaac set his coffee down and approached her slowly, as one might a skittish colt. "You have shelter here and safety, at least until spring." Isabelle's blue eyes widened with surprise. "I couldn't possibly—" "I insist," Isaac said firmly. "The cabin's small, but I can make it comfortable for you both. I spend most days at the sheriff's office anyway." The gratitude that flooded Isabelle's face made something twist in Isaac's chest. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Isaac thought about his answer carefully. "Out here, nobody survives alone. My pa taught me that. Besides," he added with a gentle smile toward Grace, "seems like the little one has taken a liking to the place." The baby had indeed fallen back asleep, her tiny fist curled around a fold of Isabelle's nightgown. For the first time since Isaac had found her, Isabelle smiled, a small, tentative thing, but genuine nonetheless. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher." "Isaac," he corrected. "If we're to be sharing quarters, even temporarily, we might as well use our given names." "Isaac," she repeated softly. Something unspoken passed between them, a moment of connection that neither was prepared to acknowledge. The following days established a routine of sorts. Isaac rose before dawn, tended the livestock, and ensured the cabin was warm before heading to town for his deputy duties. Isabelle recovered her strength rapidly, caring for Grace and gradually taking over the domestic duties of the cabin. By the time Isaac returned each evening, a hot meal awaited him. The cabin was tidy, and even his shirts had been washed and mended. Sheriff Walter Holcomb noticed the change in his deputy immediately. "You're smiling," the grizzled lawman observed one afternoon as Isaac filed reports. "It's unsettling." Isaac rolled his eyes. "Just enjoying the winter weather, Walt." "Uh-huh," the sheriff grunted skeptically. "And it has nothing to do with the pretty widow and her baby you've got stashed at your place." Isaac's head snapped up. "News travels fast." "It's my job to know what's happening in my jurisdiction," Walter replied, stroking his silver mustache. "Doc Miller's wife mentioned you buying baby things. Wasn't hard to piece together after Everett's boy spotted smoke from the Parkman homestead." Isaac sighed. "She needed help, Walt. The Blackwell gang killed her husband and burned them out." The sheriff's expression hardened. "Those bastards need to swing. Any leads?" Tracks were lost in the storm, but they were heading southeast. Isaac stood, donning his hat. "I'd like to form a posse once the weather breaks." "Agreed." Walter studied his deputy thoughtfully. "Just be careful, son. Vengeance is a tricky business, especially when there's a pretty woman involved." Isaac bristled. "This isn't about that. It's about justice." "If you say so," Walter replied, unconvinced. "But I've seen that look before. Just remember, a woman with a newborn needs stability, not a man with a bullet in his back." The warning followed Isaac home that evening, nagging at him as he approached his cabin. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, and through the frosted window, he could see the warm glow of lamplight. For the first time in years, his solitary cabin looked like a home. Isabelle greeted him with Grace in one arm and a dish towel in her free hand. "You're late," she said, but her tone held concern rather than accusation. "Sheriff needed help with some paperwork," Isaac replied, stomping snow from his boots. The savory aroma of beef stew filled the cabin, making his stomach growl appreciatively. "Something smells wonderful. Mrs. Wilson from town brought provisions, said it was a neighborly duty, though I suspect she was more curious than charitable." Isabelle smiled wryly. "She asked quite a few questions about our arrangement." Isaac hung his coat by the door. "Small towns thrive on gossip. I hope she wasn't too intrusive. Nothing I couldn't handle? Isabelle returned to the stove, stirring the stew. Though she did seem relieved when I mentioned sleeping arrangements, heat crept up Isaac's neck that had nothing to do with the fire. The cabin's single bed had remained Isabelle's and Grace's, while he continued to sleep on a bedroll near the hearth. People will talk regardless, best not to give it much thought. Isabelle ladled stew into a bowl and placed it on the table. I received a letter from my sister today. Mr. Wilson brought it from town. Something cold settled in Isaac's stomach. Good news, I hope. She and her husband would welcome Grace and me in Cheyenne, Isabelle said, her back to him as she busied herself with cutting bread. Once the weather improves, of course. Of course, Isaac echoed hollowly, surprised by the disappointment that washed over him. He'd known their arrangement was temporary, had reminded himself of that fact daily. Yet somehow, the prospect of the cabin returning to its former emptiness seemed unbearable now. They ate in companionable silence, broken only by Grace's occasional coos from her improvised cradle, a dresser drawer padded with blankets that sat on a chair near the fire. After dinner, their evening ritual continued. Isaac cleaned his revolver, while Isabelle mended clothing, the crackling fire providing both warmth and soft illumination. May I ask you something personal? Isabelle ventured after a long silence. Isaac looked up, hands stilling on the gun barrel. You can ask. Have you ever been married? The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Isaac carefully set his cleaning cloth aside. Once, he admitted quietly. A lifetime ago, it seems. Isabelle's needle paused mid-stitch. What happened? Cholera, Isaac said, the single word carrying years of grief. Summer of 72, Caroline and our son, James, he was only 2. Isabelle's soft gasp of sympathy made him look away, uncomfortable with the emotion it stirred. I'm so sorry, Isaac. I shouldn't have pried. It's all right, he assured her, resuming his cleaning with methodical precision. It's been 7 years. The pain changes, becomes part of you rather than consuming you. Isabelle's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Robert and I were only married a year. Sometimes I wonder if that makes it easier or harder, having less time to remember. There's no measuring grief, Isaac replied gently. It takes what it takes from each of us. Grace began to fuss, saving them both from further emotional disclosure. Isabelle scooped her up, cradling her close. She's hungry again. If you'll excuse me? Isaac nodded, standing abruptly. I'll check on the livestock, make sure they're settled for the night. Outside in the bitter cold, Isaac drew in deep breaths that burned his lungs. Stars pricked the black velvet sky, indifferent to human suffering below. He hadn't spoken Caroline's name aloud in years, had locked those memories away where they couldn't torment him daily. Yet, sharing that piece of himself with Isabelle felt right somehow, as if the confession had loosened something long, constricted within his chest. When he returned to the cabin, Isabelle had fallen asleep with Grace nestled beside her on the bed. The peaceful tableau stirred something primal within him, a desire to protect, to provide. He added wood to the fire, ensuring it would burn through the night, then settled onto his bedroll, watching the golden light play across their sleeping forms until his own eyes grew heavy. December gave way to January, bringing the new year of 1880 and temperatures that tested even the hardiest frontier folk. Isaac spent more time at the cabin than in town, using the weather as justification for his frequent presence. The truth was simpler and more complicated. He couldn't bear to be away from Isabelle and Grace. The baby grew stronger daily, her personality emerging in gummy smiles and determined wiggles. Isaac found himself enchanted by her tiny fingers, and the way her eyes, Isabelle's eyes, followed his movements around the cabin. She likes your voice, Isabelle observed one evening, as Grace quieted immediately when Isaac spoke. Would you mind holding her while I finish dinner? Isaac hesitated only briefly before accepting the warm bundle into his arms. Grace peered up at him solemnly before breaking into a toothless grin that nearly stopped his heart. Well now, Miss Grace, he murmured, settling into his chair by the fire. What story shall we share tonight? From the kitchen area, Isabelle watched the interaction with a complex tangle of emotions. Grace needed a father, would grow up without Robert's guidance and love. The thought brought familiar grief, but something else too, a tentative hope that perhaps her daughter might know a father's love after all someday. The passes should be clearing soon, Isaac said later that night, disrupting her thoughts. Sheriff thinks we might be able to form a posse within the week to track the Blackwell gang. Isabel's hand stilled in her mending. You're going after them? It's my job, Isaac replied simply. They've killed 5 people that we know of, including your husband. They need to face justice. And if they kill you too? The question emerged more sharply than she'd intended, revealing a concern that surprised them both. Isaac studied her face carefully. I've been handling outlaws for 6 years, Isabelle. I know what I'm doing. Robert knew about horses, yet they killed him anyway, she countered, setting aside her sewing. Violence begets violence. Haven't we all lost enough? Justice isn't violence, Isaac argued, though gently. It's the only thing that separates us from the wilderness. Isabelle stood abruptly. I should check on Grace. Isaac caught her hand as she passed, the first time he'd initiated such contact between them. The touch sent warmth spiraling up her arm. I'll be careful, he promised. I have reasons to come back now. Their gazes locked, the admission hanging in the air between them. Isabelle's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. It was too soon, too complicated, too fraught with guilt and obligation. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter of something awakening within her, something she'd thought buried alongside Robert. Grace needs her rest, she said softly, withdrawing her hand. And so do I. Isaac nodded, recognizing her retreat for what it was not rejection, but caution. They were 2 wounded souls finding unexpected comfort in one another, and neither knew quite how to navigate these treacherous emotional waters. That night, as snowflakes drifted past the window and the fire burned low, Isaac made a decision. In the morning, he rode into town earlier than usual, returning mid-afternoon with an unexpected guest. Isabelle, he called, stomping snow from his boots. There's someone here I'd like you to meet. Reverend Thomas Michaels entered behind Isaac, removing his hat respectfully. In his 60s with kind eyes and silver hair, the minister had served the community for over 2 decades. Mrs. Parkman, he greeted Isabelle warmly, Deputy Fletcher has told me of your situation. I wanted to offer my condolences for your loss and the church's assistance. Isabelle, somewhat flustered by the unexpected visitor, thanked him while Grace observed the newcomer with wide-eyed curiosity from her improvised cradle. The Reverend has agreed to officiate at a proper burial for Robert once the ground thaws, Isaac explained, and the ladies' auxiliary is organizing some necessities for you and Grace. Tears pricked at Isabelle's eyes. She hadn't allowed herself to think about Robert's body, left behind in their hasty escape. That's very kind, she managed. Not kindness, my dear, but Christian duty, Reverend Michaels replied. Our community takes care of its own, and you are now among us, however temporarily. The minister stayed for tea, discussing practical matters like church services and the possibility of temporary work once Isabelle felt ready. Throughout the conversation, Isaac remained attentive, but largely silent, watching the weight of worry gradually lift from Isabelle's shoulders as provisions were made for her future. After the Reverend's departure, Isabelle turned to Isaac with shining eyes. You arranged all this? He shrugged uncomfortably. Just mentioned your situation to the right people. This town takes care of its own, like the Reverend said. But I'm not one of them, she pointed out. I've been here barely a month. You're here now, Isaac said simply. That's enough. Impulsively, Isabelle rose on tiptoes and pressed a kiss to his weathered cheek. Thank you, Isaac. The brief contact left him momentarily speechless, his hand rising unconsciously to touch the spot where her lips had been. I should check on Thunderbolt, he mumbled, retreating to the sanctuary of the stable. In his absence, Isabelle explored her conflicted emotions. Robert had been dead barely 6 weeks, yet here she was, heart fluttering at another man's kindness. Was it disloyal to feel this stirring of attraction? Or merely human, this instinct to seek connection after loss? Grace provided no answers, only gurgled happily when Isabelle lifted her from her cradle. What are we doing, little one? She whispered against the baby's downy head. Where do we belong now? The question lingered as January progressed into February. The weather improved enough for the promised posse to form, with Isaac and 5 other men setting out to track the Blackwell gang. Their departure left Isabelle in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every sound that might herald Isaac's return. Mrs. Wilson visited daily, ostensibly to help with Grace, but clearly monitoring the propriety of the situation. Deputies and their ilk live dangerous lives, she commented on the 3rd day of Isaac's absence. Not the sort of stability a young widow needs. Isabelle bit back a sharp retort. Isaac has been nothing but honorable, Mrs. Wilson. Of course, dear, the older woman replied, her tone suggesting otherwise. Though tongues will wag when a man and woman share quarters, regardless of circumstances. People will gossip regardless of facts, Isabelle countered, her patience fraying. Isaac saved our lives and has asked nothing in return. Mrs. Wilson's eyebrows rose dramatically. Nothing at all? How unusual. The insinuation pushed Isabelle past politeness. I think Grace needs her nap now, she said firmly, moving toward the door. Thank you for visiting. Alone again, Isabelle fumed at the narrow-minded assumptions, even as she acknowledged their surface validity. To outsiders, her living arrangement with Isaac appeared questionable at best, scandalous at worst. Yet the thought of taking Grace to Cheyenne as originally planned now filled her with inexplicable dread. On the 5th day of the posse's absence, a snowstorm blew in without warning, howling around the cabin's eaves with vengeful fury. Isabelle paced anxiously, imagining Isaac caught in the blizzard, perhaps injured or worse. By nightfall, her worry had transformed to fear, then to a cold certainty that something was terribly wrong. Just before midnight, when the storm was at its fiercest, Isabelle heard the distinctive sound of approaching horses. She flung open the door to find Isaac dismounting painfully, his left arm bound in a makeshift sling stained with blood. Isaac! She rushed forward, heedless of the snow, as several other riders continued past toward town. You're hurt. Just a graze, he assured her through gritted teeth, though his pallor suggested otherwise. Caught up to Blackwell near the Colorado border, there was a gunfight. Isabelle helped him inside, easing him into a chair by the fire. Did you capture them? Got 2 of the gang, but Blackwell himself escaped. Isaac winced as she helped remove his coat. I'll get him eventually. The bullet had indeed grazed his upper arm, but the wound was angry and hot to the touch. This needs cleaning, Isabelle said firmly, gathering supplies. And you need a doctor. Doc will be busy with Marshal Evans. He took a bullet to the chest. Isaac's eyes drifted to Grace's cradle. Is she all right? The question, so concerned despite his own injury, made Isabelle's heart constrict. She's perfect, she assured him, setting water to boil. Now, be still and let me tend to you. Isaac submitted to her ministrations with minimal complaint, though pain etched deep lines around his mouth as she cleaned and bandaged the wound. The intimacy of the moment, her hands on his bare skin, his breath warm against her wrist as she worked, stirred something primal between them. I was worried, Isabelle admitted quietly, securing the bandage. When the storm came and you weren't back, I promised I'd return, Isaac reminded her, his good hand capturing hers. I keep my promises, Isabelle. Their gazes locked, the air between them charged with unspoken emotion. Isabelle found herself leaning closer, drawn by some invisible force. Isaac's eyes darkened, his focus dropping to her lips. Grace's sudden wail shattered the moment. Isabelle jerked back, cheeks flaming as she hurried to attend the baby. Behind her, she heard Isaac's shaky exhale. You should rest, she said once Grace had settled. Take the bed tonight. I'm fine here, he insisted stubbornly, already arranging his bedroll. Don't be ridiculous, Isabelle countered, her tone brooking no argument. You're injured and exhausted. The bed is yours tonight. Their compromise, Isabelle and Grace taking one side of the bed, Isaac the other, with a bolster of blankets between them, satisfied propriety while acknowledging his need for proper rest. Still, Isabelle lay awake long after Isaac's breathing had deepened into sleep, acutely aware of his presence mere inches away. Recovery took longer than Isaac admitted. For 2 weeks he remained at the cabin rather than resuming his duties, his strength returning gradually. During this time, their relationship shifted subtly, the enforced proximity breaking down carefully maintained barriers. Isaac taught Isabelle to shoot his spare revolver, insisting she needed to protect herself and Grace. Isabelle shared stories of her childhood in Pennsylvania, of dreams deferred when her parents died, and she followed her sister west. They discovered shared tastes in literature, mutual distaste for pretension, and compatible views on raising children. "You're a natural with her," Isabelle observed one afternoon, as Isaac entertained Grace, who now smiled and cooed regularly. "You would have been a wonderful father to your son." Instead of the shadow that usually crossed his features at mention of his past, Isaac smiled thoughtfully. "I like to think I still might be someday. A father, I mean." The statement hung between them, ripe with possibility. Isabelle busied herself with mending, unable to meet his gaze lest he read too much in her expression. That evening, a knock at the door revealed Sheriff Holcomb, hat in hand. "Evening, Isaac, Mrs. Parkman," he greeted them. "Mind if I come in?" The sheriff's news was both welcome and troubling. The remaining Blackwell gang members had been captured in Denver, but Thomas Blackwell himself was still at large and reportedly seeking revenge against those who'd killed his brothers. "He was heard making specific threats against you, Isaac," Walter said gravely. "And by extension, Mrs. Parkman and the baby." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Let him come. I'll be waiting." "That's just it," Walter continued. "You won't. Governor's ordered a special detachment to track Blackwell into New Mexico territory. You're to join them. Train leaves from Cheyenne in 3 days. "No." Isaac's refusal was immediate and firm. "I'm not leaving Isabelle and Grace unprotected." "You don't have a choice, son. It's an order." Walter's expression softened. "Mrs. Parkman and the little one can stay with me and the missus until you return. They'll be safe." Isabelle, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "How long would he be gone?" "Hard to say. Weeks, maybe months," Walter admitted. "Blackwell knows that territory well." "Then I'll take Grace to my sister's in Cheyenne," Isabelle decided, surprising both men. "We were headed there eventually anyway." Isaac stared at her, something like betrayal flashing in his eyes. "Isabelle." "It makes sense," she continued, not meeting his gaze. "We've imposed on your hospitality long enough, Isaac. This gives you freedom to do your duty without worrying about us." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Sensible plan. I can arrange an escort to Cheyenne day after tomorrow." After Walter left, silence filled the cabin, broken only by Grace's soft noises as she drifted towards sleep. Isaac paced like a caged animal, tension radiating from his shoulders. "You were always planning to leave," he finally said, his voice deceptively calm. "I just thought—" "It matters not what I thought." Isabelle placed Grace in her cradle before responding. "What did you think, Isaac?" He stopped pacing, facing her with raw honesty. "I thought you might stay, that we might—" He gestured vaguely, words failing him. "That we might what?" Isabelle pressed, heart pounding. "Build something on the foundation of tragedy and obligation? Is that all this has been to you? Obligation?" His voice cracked on the word. "No," she whispered, tears threatening. "You know it hasn't." Isaac closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Then tell me what it has been." "Complicated," she breathed, unable to look away from the intensity in his gaze. "Unexpected, frightening in its potential." "I love you," Isaac declared simply. "I love Grace. I want you both to stay, to be my family when this is over. But I need to know if there's any chance you might someday feel the same." Isabelle closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the confession she'd both longed for and dreaded. "I feel so much," she admitted. "Too much, too soon. Robert's barely cold in the ground, and here I am with my heart pulling in new directions." "I'm not asking for immediate answers," Isaac said gently, thumbs brushing her cheeks. "Just hope. Something to come back to." Opening her eyes, Isabelle saw everything she needed in his steady gaze: patience, understanding, and unwavering devotion. Slowly, deliberately, she rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss began tentatively, a question rather than a demand. When Isaac responded, it was with equal gentleness, as if she were something precious that might shatter under too much pressure. Gradually, the kiss deepened, expressing what words couldn't yet articulate: longing, possibility, the promise of something worth waiting for. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isabelle rested her forehead against his chest. "Is that enough hope?" Isaac's chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. "More than enough." The journey to Cheyenne 2 days later was undertaken in companionable silence, the unspoken understanding between them making words unnecessary. Bryn Parkman welcomed her sister and niece warmly, her husband Marcus offering Isaac genuine hospitality despite the circumstances of their arrival. "How long can you stay?" Bryn asked Isaac over dinner. "Just tonight," he replied regretfully. "My train leaves at noon tomorrow." Later, in the privacy of the guest parlor while the others retired, Isabelle and Isaac savored their last hours together. Grace slept peacefully in a proper cradle, a gift from her aunt and uncle, allowing the adults an uninterrupted conversation about the future. "I'll write when I can," Isaac promised, holding Isabelle's hand between both of his, "and I'll return as soon as Blackwell is captured." "We'll be waiting," Isabelle assured him, having made her decision during their journey. "Right here in Cheyenne." Isaac's eyes lit with hope. "And then?" "And then," she said softly, "we'll see about that family you mentioned." Their parting at the train station the next day was bittersweet. Isaac knelt to kiss Grace's forehead, whispering promises to return, before rising to face Isabelle. "I meant every word," he said quietly. "I love you both." Isabelle, mindful of the public setting, squeezed his hands. "Come back to us," she whispered. "That's all I ask." The weeks that followed tested Isabelle's patience and resolve. She settled into life with Bryn's family, helping with household duties, and gradually building a new social circle through church activities. Letters from Isaac arrived sporadically, each treasured and read repeatedly until the paper grew thin from handling. In late March, news reached Cheyenne that Thomas Blackwell had been cornered and killed in a shootout near Santa Fe. Isabelle's relief was tempered by anxiety when no immediate word came from Isaac. 2 agonizing weeks later, a telegram arrived, "Returning on Friday. Train stop. All well stop, Isaac." Isabelle spent Friday morning in a flurry of preparation, dressing Grace in her finest gown and herself in a new blue dress that matched her eyes. At the station, surrounded by arriving and departing passengers, she scanned each face anxiously until finally, there he was. Isaac appeared thinner, his face more weathered than she remembered, but his smile when he spotted them erased all evidence of hardship. He crossed the platform in long strides, dropping his bag to sweep Isabelle into an embrace that lifted her feet from the ground. "You're here," he breathed against her hair. "You're really here." "We promised," she reminded him, laughing through happy tears. Isaac set her down gently to greet Grace, who had grown remarkably in his absence. To Isabelle's delight, the baby reached for him immediately, recognizing him despite the separation. That evening, after dinner with Bryn and Marcus, Isaac and Isabelle walked in the garden behind the house, Grace sleeping soundly indoors. "I've been offered a position," Isaac said as they strolled beneath budding trees. "Marshal for the Wyoming Territory based in Cheyenne." Isabelle's steps faltered. "That sounds like a significant promotion." "It is," he confirmed, "but I've conditions before accepting." "What conditions?" Isaac stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "That I can have a home here, a real home, not bachelor quarters." He took her hands in his. "That I can court you properly, with your sister's blessing. That someday when you're ready, we might become a true family." Moonlight silvered Isabelle's tears as she gazed up at him. "I don't need courting, Isaac. These months apart, they've shown me what matters. Life is too unpredictable, too precious to waste on conventions." "What are you saying?" he asked, barely breathing. "I'm saying I love you," she declared simply. "I'm saying Grace needs a father, and I need a partner. I'm saying yes to everything you're offering: the home, the family, the future together." Isaac's expression transformed with wonder. "Are you certain? I know it's been less than a year since you carried a woman and her newborn to warmth when sleet froze the South Pasture." Isabelle interrupted gently. "Yes, I'm certain. Robert will always be part of me, part of Grace. But life continues, and my heart has chosen you." Under the spring moon, their kiss sealed promises that would carry them through the seasons ahead, through Isaac's appointment as marshal, their summer wedding, officiated by Reverend Michaels, the birth of their son, Robert Isaac Fletcher, the following year, and the many joys and challenges of building a life together on the Wyoming frontier. And each winter, when sleet froze the pastures and snowdrifts piled against their home in Cheyenne, Isabelle would remind their children of the providence that brought their family together, how the bitter cold of loss had ultimately led to the enduring warmth of love found in the most desperate of circumstances. Years later, when Isaac and Isabelle celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, Grace, now a poised young woman with her mother's eyes and her adoptive father's steady determination, raised a toast to the couple who had taught her the most important lesson of all, that even in the harshest winter, new life takes root, waiting for the thaw to reveal its strength and beauty. "To my parents," she said, her voice carrying across the gathering, "who showed us that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single act of courage, like carrying a woman and her newborn to warmth when all the world is frozen." Isaac, his hair now silver but his eyes still bright with devotion, squeezed Isabelle's hand beneath the table. "Best decision I ever made," he whispered for her ears alone. Isabelle's answering smile held the wisdom of their shared decades. "Providence," she reminded him, echoing her words from that first night in his cabin so many years ago. Not luck, but providence. And as they looked around at the family they had built together, children born of their love and children welcomed into their hearts, all thriving despite the odds they knew, with absolute certainty that their story, born in ice and nurtured in warmth, had always been destined to bloom.